Hey everybody, welcome back to Rusty Wrench Restorations. You know, sometimes my friends will ask me, hey Jim, do you own a Ferrari? And if you do you change your own oil? And I gotta tell them, well, first of all, my name's not Jim. Second of all, I don't own a Ferrari. And if I did, I sure wouldn't be changing my own oil. But my name is Steve, I own a lot of tractors, and I do change my own hydraulic cylinder seals. And I'm gonna show you so you know how to. Alright, don't beat me up on the cheesy intro. Just trying to do something a little different. We are going to talk about hydraulic cylinders today though. So here I have a set from Sideshow Bobcat. This longer one is the boom lift cylinder and the shorter one is the bucket tilt cylinder. So as you can see, they're the same diameter, and most tractors, typically your cylinders are going to be the same. Here, let's take a look at Bozo. Here's the tilt cylinders for the bucket and lift cylinders for the boom arms. Now, of course, they're different in terms of length, but the diameter of the barrel of the cylinder most of the time are the same. So basically, the kits are going to be the same. So if you want to replace the seals on all four of your cylinders, just get 4 kits. They're going to have the same parts. Now, you can't always hold me to that. Sometimes people will change different components, put non-OEM parts on, so they could be different. So, you know, use your best judgment as far as what you think you'll need for your project. But for this one here, all 4 are the same. So here's the hydraulic seal kit that I got off eBay. I'll show you the part numbers here in case you happen to have a Bobcat 371. That's what you'll need. And I think these kits were, they're about, let's average like 15 to 16 bucks a piece. So you're looking at, you know, about 60 or 70 bucks to do all 4 of them, which really isn't bad to not have any oil leaks. Now, like I said, this longer one is for the lift arm, and the shorter one for the tilt cylinder. Be sure you label your cylinders. Obviously, I know which one is which because of the length. This happens to be the left lift cylinder, and this happens to be the right tilt cylinder. But I just wanted to show you an example. You can see I've already removed all the paint and rust on here. And the reason I do that is because when I clean this top area around this lip seal, it can damage that seal. As you can see, this one's pretty worn out. And that doesn't matter because I'm going to change it anyway. If I had a new seal on here and I happened to nick it with the wire brush or whatever, you know, I'd mess it up, and I just don't want to do that. So I clean mine up first. I'll replace the seals, I'll wipe everything down with brake cleaner, and then it's ready for prime and paint. When it gets warmer, because it's like 29 degrees right now, and that brings me to another point. Those seal kits in the cold weather become very rigid. The rubber components don't like the cold, and they can be kind of a pain to work on. So I recommend doing it inside where it's a little warmer. I'm kind of limited to what I have out here. It will still work. Just know that it's probably going to take a little more effort to get some of these seals on, but just be careful to make sure you don't roll any of the O-rings. And some of the seals have a square profile. You definitely don't want to twist those because you're just going to have a bigger leak than you probably have right now. Now, one other thing I did want to go over before we start taking this apart is some tools you'll need. Now, these are spanners. There's different types of spanner wrenches. This one here is a hook spanner. You can see it's got like a little hook on there, and typically you're going to use these to remove this top gland. This one doesn't have it, but in the application for this hook spanner, it would hook on here. You would have kind of some square nodules on there, almost look like a castellated nut, and you would use that hook spanner to loosen that gland off the cylinder barrel. The other type is very similar. It still has that same flexible actuation, but you can see it's got like a round dowel, and it's still a hook spanner, but it's more of a pin spanner, and it works the same way, only you're going to have holes that are drilled every so often in the rim of this gland. And then these two are kind of the same. This is just a smaller one that's adjustable. This is the one we're going to attempt to use today, but it's just a different type of pin spanner, and these pins that are on the end fit inside the holes that are on the face of the gland. So basically you just kind of adjust it and they'd snap in like that, and you use this to loosen it up. I guarantee you 150% that it's not going to work. And that's where this bad boy comes into play. So this is basically like a type of pipe wrench. You can use a regular pipe wrench if you want. This is the one that I like. It'll really kind of grab onto that gland, and the more turning force that I put on it, the more pressure it squeezes down. And it's got a nice shank type handle, so I can easily slide a piece of pipe or a persuasion bar over it. So let's go ahead and head back here to the Bobcat, because honestly it's easier to get these cylinders apart when they're kind of installed on the machine, and I'll let you know, or I'll show you what I'm talking about. So like I said, sometimes it's easier to just put the cylinder back on the machine. Now I know this is the shorter tilt cylinder and I'm putting it in the lift cylinder position. It doesn't really matter, just kind of get it in place with the pin through. And all that's going to do is when I start to try to put some rotational torque on this gland, it's going to keep the cylinder from spinning and kind of hold it for me. I guess you could put it in a vise. This just always seems to work for me. Now if you're not near the machine, you can kind of improvise. I guess you could put this in like the top link of a 3-point hitch. I have the bucket over there. I could actually put the cylinder back in the bucket, or you could put it in a vise. I have had cylinders in the past where I was able to stick a large crowbar through here and just kind of have that leverage on the ground and step on the cylinder and get it off. This one I don't think is going to be that easy. So the barrel of this is steel, and the gland nut on the top here is aluminum. So typically when you have these two dissimilar metals, they corrode at different rates, or they accelerate each other, and they tend to get stuck. So usually these are fine thread, and that just adds to the problem. So you know, you can soak these if you want, you can try heating, but they're just always going to be a bear to get off. I can almost guarantee, like I said, 150% that spanner is not going to work on here. It just doesn't typically have enough bite in those holes to get such a hard component apart. So I'll end up using the pipe wrench. It's going to gall and mar up this gland a little bit, and that's just the risk I'm willing to take. It is what it is. Sometimes you got to lose the battle to win the war. So if you got a little more time and you want to soak it and heat it, that's on you. Today, this girl's coming apart. Alright, so we'll try with this spanner just to see how it goes. I highly doubt it. Of course, now that I've talked it up so much, it probably won't, and this one's not even going to fit in those holes. And that's okay, because I guarantee it's not going to come apart. And how do I know that? Well, I rebuilt one of the other ones yesterday and it didn't come apart. So I'm going to go ahead and put this, this pipe wrench on the gland. You want to make sure that you're on the gland, got as much meat grabbing as you can, but you want to make sure you're not touching this barrel anywhere, because it's just going to fight against you and make things harder. So put a little cheater on here and see what we're dealing with. Oh, look at that. Oh, you totally made me look like a liar. Always happens. Alright, well, that's a good problem to have. So that came apart really easy. So we'll go ahead and thread this out. As you can see, I've got a rag here. These ones are pretty much purged of any hydraulic oil. I've cycled the cylinders by hand and blown it out both sides, but there may still be some residual inside the barrel here, so the rag will hopefully keep that. So just kind of going over the components of this, where your hoses hook in, those are your ports. This here is called your barrel, or the cylinder sleeve. This part that I'm unthreading right now is the gland nut. And almost out. This part here that goes in and out, that's your rod. And as we pull this out, this is usually where it would make a mess. There we go. This part down here is your piston, and then the piston nut. There's piston seals. There's a piston gland inside. Actually, I think it's just an O-ring. And then this packing gland up at the top has some seals on the outside, and internal as well. There's a lip seal and then the gland seal. So now that we've got that out, there's really not much left to do with the barrel, except I am going to clean inside. both for debris and oil, but then I'm also going to clean these threads to make sure there isn't any nastiness on there. But this assembly, as it is almost ready to take over the table for disassembly. But while we're right here, I'm going to show you one more trick if I can get this to balance on the tire. I'm going to go ahead and pull this cylinder barrel out. Hang on to my pin. I'm going to set this aside, and there goes my toe. But I'm going to take the rod and I'm going to flip it on the other side. Actually, I guess I can just use this bolt that I have going through. This is part of my whole work smarter, not harder. Now this is the bucket end of it. Now I'm going to insert the bucket end of the rod into the machine and put the bolt back through. And the reason we're doing that is to continue taking this apart. We need to remove the piston nut at the bottom. So let me grab a socket and we'll get that off. Alright, I've got my socket. Again, these are fine thread. Sometimes they are terrible to get apart, sometimes they're not. We'll just kind of see how we're doing here. See if we can get it by hand. Look at that. That came by hand. I didn't even have to use the breaker bar. Sometimes you might need to use an impact, and sometimes you might need to use a 8-foot piece of cheater pipe. But I'm gonna assume that because this gland came out so easy, or easier than normal, and that this nut was able to come off by hand, that this has been apart before, and someone may have already changed these seals and stuff. So alright, so we got the nut loosened up. I haven't taken it off yet. We're going to go ahead and pull the rod out. So here's the rod with everything complete. I haven't taken anything off yet, and we'll bring this over to the table and we'll dissect this and see what we got going on. Alright, we've got the rod over here on the table now. I've got it on a white towel so that you can kind of see what's going on with everything. I've got the cylinder barrel just kind of off to the side. Two additional tools you'll probably need is a good scribe that's got a real pointy end on it, and then I have these other ones. I think I got these from a dentist or something, but it's a scribe, but it's got a little ball weld on the end, so it's not pointy and sharp. It's just good for manipulating O-rings if you need to get behind and move them around without using the sharp end that can damage the new seals. So let's go ahead and pull this apart, and then we'll compare what we took off the rod that we pulled out with what we have in our kit. I'm going to do the best I can to keep this in the frame so you can see everything, but I am going to have to kind of move it around a little bit. So we brought the piston rod over and we'll uncouple the nut. Now I will say, before you really start taking it apart, it might be good to take a picture so you know how things are orientated on here. For an example, up here on the gland, there's a brownish colored seal to the top end with a black O-ring underneath, and then down here the actual piston itself, we'll take the nut off. The piston itself, there's an O-ring under there. Oh, that came off pretty easy. It's in this direction with the smaller end towards the top. You could accidentally install it this way. It's probably still gonna work, but that's how it comes off. So we'll pull that off and just, you know, kind of keep your parts where they need to be. Now this piston has a seal on the outside. There's actually an O-ring underneath of it, and this particular one does not have one inside the piston itself, but it does have the O-ring on the shaft here, so we'll end up getting that off as well. We'll go over here and we'll slide the gland down and off, and you'll see that, again, like I said, there's the O-ring and a seal, and then on the top is that wiper seal, and then down inside there's the rod seal. So those all have to come out. When you're taking these things apart, you don't really have to worry so much about tearing O-rings or damaging anything because, well, they're getting replaced. But I do highly recommend that as you pull them apart, you set them next to the area that you took it off from, so you know that, for an example, this O-ring goes on here. And we'll pull the new parts out of our kit as well and compare to make sure that we have everything we need and nothing we don't. So being careful not to poke yourself, you want to go ahead and dig this seal out of here. So that's the outer seal on the piston. It's like a composite kind of material, but inside there's another O-ring, so we'll go ahead and fish that out as well. Again, without stabbing yourself, if at all possible. Alright, so that O-ring we know goes inside that seal. Now the piston is completely taken down. We're going to clean all these parts, but let's continue moving down. So here's the gland. We've got the O-ring on there. Should probably use this other end here. And remember, that goes on the bottom of the gland itself. And then there's this other seal. It's kind of a rubbery seal. All right, and since we know that goes on top, I'm going to say this is the top end. I'll set that on top of the washer. However you need to do it to keep track yourself, that's on you. Next, we'll go ahead and pull this lip seal out of the top. Usually these are pretty brittle and they'll break apart. They've been out in the weather and in the sun and exposed to all kinds of dirt and debris and everything. I did do the other one yesterday. I ended up re-recording this because I had my back to the camera the whole time and it was just terrible. But I will say that this seal came out in one piece, whereas the other one was disintegrated. It was just in pieces. So, all right, I got the rod seal down inside there. That's the last one. So we'll go ahead and dig that out as well. And these are a little bit harder to get in and out. Probably the hardest one to get back in. Again, coming out doesn't really matter because it's getting replaced, but that's it right there. All right, so that's it. It's taken apart. Let me go ahead and clean this. I want to clean the piston, the gland, and the rod, and then we'll come back and we'll compare what we took out to what's in the kit. All right, I got everything cleaned up with brake cleaner. You know, I might have some people telling me, oh, you should be using a lint-free rag and be in a sterile environment. Well, maybe so, but this is how we're going to do it here. I know plenty of these have been rebuilt out in the field and haven't had issues. All right, so now I've taken all of the parts out of my kit. I'll set them right here. And I just want to match them up with what I have. Now, don't get them confused. You don't want to put the new O-ring next to the bad ring and it's bad, right? So you can kind of do a one-for-one swap if you want. So here's the small O-ring for the rod. I'll replace it with the new one. Let's see here. I've got my outside seal with the internal O-ring. It's going to go in the piston, so we'll swap those out. I'll just put my old parts to the pile. Don't throw them away yet. You might need to look at something. Let's see. We got the big O-ring and the flat seal. Here's the big O-ring. This flat rubbery seal it's black in this kit, which is fine. So we'll set them there. Remember we had the orangey colored one on top, so we'll put the black one on top there. And then we've got our two seals. So here's the wiper seal. I don't know if you can see, it's got kind of a cone shape. That goes up to the top. That's this one. And then this other square one, that's the intermediate one, the rod seal in the middle. So we can go ahead and take those old ones away. So there we are. We're back to all of our hardware components and new software, all the new stuff. So it's time for reassembly. Doesn't matter what order you go in, how you do it, whatever's comfortable for you. The only thing I do recommend is, I got this little oil can here. You want to very thoroughly lubricate everything. Even more so, I'm outside, it's in the cold, but you don't want to put any O-rings or seals together dry. You want to always use some type of oil or lubricant. So I'm just using some of this like 1540. It's basically the stuff that's going to be in the system anyway. And there's no such thing as too much when it comes to this. Get everything very oily and lubricated. So I'm going to stop yapping right now and I'll get some gloves on and we'll go ahead and assemble everything. This is when this other pick or scribe comes into use. You can see it's got these balls on the end. They're not sharp. It's not going to damage new O-rings, but especially this seal here, the one that goes down inside the gland, that rod seal, is really kind of a pain to get in, and sometimes you got to kind of give it some coercion and some, you know, some positive reinforcement, I guess, and this is a pretty good tool to do it. If you use the pointed scribe, it's just going to dig into these O-rings and seals and mess them up. So let's get some gloves, some oil, and put this back together. Alright, let's start with the gland. So we'll do the internal ones. They're the hardest ones, so we'll just get those knocked out. Hardest in my opinion anyway. So we'll get plenty of oil on the inside where both of those seals are going to go. And then we'll thoroughly coat the seals themselves with some oil. Like I said, this internal one's kind of a pain. You can kind of push it in on itself to shrink that outer diameter and get it inside and pop it in. Easier said than done. When it's cold like this, they're not as pliable as they are as if I was doing it in the summer, but we'll do the best we can. I may end up editing this just to move things along so you don't see me here fighting with this, because I guarantee you it's not going to go right in, and it can be kind of a pain. But I do want to show you it is got a square profile to it, as does this one here for the piston. So you want to make sure you don't roll that in there. You want to make sure it's in square. I had stopped the camera because I figured it was going to fight me like the one yesterday did, and it popped right in. So like I said, I'll use this O-ring as an example. You want to just kind of tuck it in like a kidney bean and fold it in on itself, so it kind of looks like a, I don't know, like a letter E, but it'll slide down in that bore, and then once it gets to where the groove is, boop, it'll pop back out and pop into place. So that one's in there. This top one usually goes in a little bit easier, but we can kind of do the same thing. This one actually should just pop right in. Don't want to get my glove stuck under there. Come on. There we go. Alright, so that top wiper seal's in. You always want to check everything, make sure it looks round, put some pressure on it, kind of move it around, make sure it's in there. Everything's good. Alright, this top rubbery one, that's going to go on first. Same thing. Heavily lubricate every part. You can't use too much oil. Alright, that's just going to slide on there. Use that scribe to push it all the way down to the position it should be in. Sometimes you can just use your hand. There we go. Roll that around, and like I said, it doesn't damage anything. You can see it's all the way up on that top edge. And now we'll get the O-ring on there. Good to go. Alright, so this gland seal's done. We can go ahead and install that on the rod now. So same thing, lots of oil. We'll get some down inside. Spread it around with your fingers. Now you want to be careful, because these are new seals in here, going past these threads on the rod and then going down the rod itself. Sometimes they are a little bit hard to get started, and I recommend just kind of doing like a circular rotational rocking motion, and that'll usually get you in. I know you can't see this, it's out of the camera's view. There we go. So we've got the gland on there now, and you want to take a look at that wiper, make sure it didn't fold over inside of itself. Everything looks good there. You can go ahead and slide that up and out of the way. So that end's done. Alright, now we're down here. We'll work on the piston, but before we do that, I want to make sure we don't forget to put this little O-ring here on the rod, otherwise we'll have to pull that piston back off. So again, just be careful. I know I'm out of frame here. Just be careful getting the O-ring over the threads of the rod. Alright, there we go. New O-ring is on there. Now we just have to put the seals on the piston. These ones are a little bit easy and a little bit hard. And I'll show you why here in a second. So the O-ring goes on first. That's obviously the easy one. Just gonna kind of pop it on. Not a big deal. Make sure it's seated in there, hasn't rolled. Alright, now this one's probably the next hardest one, next to that gland seal inside. It's not very pliable and flexible, so it is a little hard to get over the piston. Being it's cold out, it definitely doesn't help the situation. So really the only thing I can tell you is use a lot of oil and just take your time. Again, This one here has a square cut profile. If you cut this and you looked at it, it's a square. You don't want this to twist because it will try to twist when you're getting it on here and become twisted in that groove. By the time you get it back out again, it's probably trash and you're gonna have to order another kit. So just take your time trying to get this on there. It can be frustrating. I'll let the video roll. It might go long, but we'll kind of see where we're at. And you can stretch it a little bit, but I wouldn't mess with it any more than you have to. It's gonna stretch when you push it on there, and once it gets into that groove, it's actually gonna seem like it's a little bit loose in there, and that's okay because it's gonna go back. Wow, this one's really tight compared to the one I did yesterday. All right, I got that in there. It's a little bit stretched out, but it'll shrink up. So we'll go ahead and lubricate this one more time. Go ahead and slide the piston over that O-ring and get our nut started. So at this point, I need to get the rod back on the machine with the bolt so that I can torque this nut. That's going to be 160 foot-pounds, and then we'll come back over here and we'll get the piston and the rest of the rod inside the barrel. Got the old nut torqued to 160, not the German torque, good and tight. It's actually torqued to 160. So now we're ready to reinstall the rod back into the barrel. So this one here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera. You got the threaded section, and there's actually a nice little bevel before it goes into the barrel sleeve itself. That's definitely a big help in getting this piston seal in there. Some of them can really fight you. The one I did yesterday really wasn't too bad. Went in pretty easy. Just like I said before, you can't use too much oil. Really get these things lubricated down. It will help your purpose. Alright, so we're going to stick this in here. Being careful of the threads on that seal. I know this is going to go out of view, but I got to stand this up for a second. And I'm going to use that kind of rocking circular motion to try to get that seal to wedge into that. There we go. Wedge into the barrel. So now that that's in, we can compress it down some more, and then we'll go ahead and thread the gland nut back into the barrel again. Now that we've cleaned everything up, it threads in a lot easier, and you could even use the spanner on here if you want to tighten it up. I don't know what the torque setting is for this, but you want to get that on there nice and tight. Let's see, I think this spanner is going to be too small. I might have to get another one. This one here worked on the other gland, but not on here. So I'll get another spanner and get that tightened up. Alright everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I ended up putting the cylinder back in the machine and used the pipe wrench to tighten the gland nut. I don't know as though there's really any way you could even check the torque on that. I didn't even bother to look. They do make some torque wrenches that have like a square cut out on the handle, so you could in fact put a torque wrench on it. I said torque wrenches. Spanner wrenches that have the hole for the torque wrench, but then you got to calculate the length of it and get into all some scientific rocket science stuff that we don't need. It's a tractor lift cylinder, tilt cylinder. You don't have to get that involved. Just make sure it's tight. If it starts leaking, tighten it up some more. So anyway, I'm going to clean this up with some brake cleaner, get all the oil and residue off, and hopefully soon, in a week or so, we'll get some warmer weather and get some primer on here and get it painted up. So hopefully you learned something out of this. If you've done one, you've done them all. They're all pretty much the same. I am going to do a video on Bozo, the lift and tilt cylinders for that one as well, just in case there's some different torque specs or maybe some different seals. But they're all pretty much the same, and you really don't need anything too crazy to do it. So anyway, I appreciate you watching. We'll catch you in the next one.